Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Wise Practice Podcast. I'm Amy Dover, licensed marriage and family therapist, owner of Dover Counseling Services in Alabama, and a Wise Practice consultant. So, this is part one of a four-part series for the month of June, and I'm looking forward to spending time with you. I'm also excited because this is the first time that I've done the podcast in video form. Typically, well, I've done a couple of interviews last year. I did those, but we weren't doing it in video yet. We weren't putting them out in video yet. So I'm excited to do this as a video. So hopefully all will go well. So you're going to see me kind of looking at my notes, looking at the camera, looking around as I talk about things. So just bear with me, but I'm excited to be doing this a little bit differently. And so you guys can see my face, my animated face as I talk. All right, so today I really want to talk about something that doesn't get said out loud nearly enough in our world, and that is this. Leading a practice can be one of the loneliest things that you do. Not lonely because you don't have people around you, not lonely because nobody cares, but lonely in a very specific, very particular way that I think that you will recognize immediately if you've been in the seat for any length of time. And that is the loneliness that both solo practitioners and group owners can experience. It is a very specific loneliness. So let me begin with a story. A few years ago, I sat alone in my office in the middle of my practice that was full of people, and I had never felt more isolated as a leader or as a therapist or a group practice owner or just a practice owner, period, in my life. Something was wrong in my practice. I could feel it, and I had almost nobody I could talk to about it. And if you've ever been in that place, you know exactly what I mean. And that's what this episode is about. And I think by the time we're done, you're going to feel something shift. So let me try to name this loneliness as specifically as I can, because I think we often dismiss it or minimize it. We're therapists and we do that sometimes, right? We tell ourselves, I have a supportive spouse, I have good friends, I have a team who works here. Even though I'm a solo owner, I have other solo practitioners that I can talk to, or I have other people who are business colleagues who understand. All of that can be true, and you can still feel profoundly lonely in the work of leading a practice. Again, whether you're solo or a group. Because here's what makes practice ownership uniquely isolating for us. Every major decision you make requires you to hold multiple worlds at once. You're holding clinical knowledge, business needs, legal and ethical awareness, financial responsibility. And if you're a Christian practice owner, you're also holding your faith, your biblical values, and a deep sense of calling, all at the same time, every single day. And when you try to talk to someone about a hard decision, even someone who loves you, they almost always only have access to one or two of those worlds. Your spouse might get the emotional weight, but not the clinical nuance. Your therapist friends might get the clinical piece, but not the business reality. Your business older friends might understand the financial pressure, but have absolutely no framework for why you just can't make the most profitable decision and move on. And if you're a solo practice owner, your team, or excuse me, if you're a group practice owner, your team can't be your people for this. It's not appropriate, it's not fair to them. So you lead them and you love them and you carry things they will never fully know about. Here's what that loneliness actually feels like in practice. It feels like having a conversation with someone you trust, where you have to spend 10 minutes explaining the context before you can even get to the point, and then by then you're exhausted and they're lost. It feels like making a decision that you know is right. You know it is right, and still having almost no one who can fully affirm it with you because they don't get it. They don't have all the pieces that you're holding. It feels like being the only person everyone comes to and having almost nowhere to go yourself. That's the loneliness that I'm talking about. So, I want to tell you about a season that started in 2022 for me. That was one of the hardest of my entire journey as a practice owner. And I'm sharing it because I think a lot of you are going to recognize something in it. So in 2022, Dover Counseling officially became a seven-figure practice, and I was so proud of that. Not from an arrogant, prideful, I did all this on my own posture. It was very much of, Look at what we're doing for our community. Look at this beautiful work that we're doing for the people around us, how we're serving others, how we are doing God's work, like collaborating with him in this beautiful thing that we're doing here. I was so proud and excited about that. I wanted to celebrate it with my team. So I told him. I announced the milestone thinking that we were going to have this moment together. And at the time I had 16 therapists at the time, but I thought we were going to have this moment together, this acknowledgement of how much good we were doing in this world, in our community, how many people we were serving, how far we had come. I had started out as a lonely solo practitioner, and at this point in 2022, we were conducting over 1,000 sessions per month, something I never would have imagined. But after my announcement, something shifted, subtly at first, but unmistakably. The energy in the practice changed. And over the following weeks and months, I started to see things I hadn't seen before: entitlement, cliques forming, a sense of what more can I get that hadn't been there before, moments of rudeness that caught me completely off guard. And I'm sitting in my office thinking, I'm on a 70-30 split with these folks. I'm giving almost 70 cents of every dollar that comes into I am giving away 70 cents of every dollar that comes into this practice. And I'm the one carrying all the overhead costs, every liability, every administrative burden. And somehow hearing one big number made some people feel like I was taking advantage of them. Now, side note, I did another podcast episode last year about how my transition from 1099 to W-2, because I did I did a lot of things wrong when I was a 1099, and that's part of that episode about my decision to transition and how much better things have been for me as a W-2. But this was before I knew those things, and sitting there when I was like, man, I'm giving so much to these people, and but there's this entitlement and there are these cliques and there's this rudeness that wasn't there before. Like, what is happening to my practice? And I do want to be careful here because I absolutely adore my team. My current team is fabulous and they are gifts from heaven. And at the time, I really loved my team then. I really thought we were all on the same page, but I was wrong. But this is a story that I think a lot of practice owners just need to hear, because what I was watching but didn't realize at the time was a culture shift in my practice. Something had come into my practice that didn't belong there, and I didn't know how to name it. I didn't know how to stop it, and I had almost nobody I could talk to about it. Truly, almost nobody. Like, even my practice owner colleagues in the town next to me, who were also Christian, couldn't quite understand what I was talking about because their practices weren't the size of mine. They were smaller, and they couldn't quite wrap their minds around it. But I remember sitting in my office that day, alone, just thinking and praying. I could feel that something was wrong, something rotten had crept in. Like, I could smell it. And I was blaming myself the way people pleasers do, the way relational people do when something they love starts to feel broken. I wasn't even sure what I had done. I just knew that it hurt and it was wrong. And I know I was asking God for help, for his wisdom, for his guidance, for his protection over something that I had built and loved and poured myself into. And that is a profoundly lonely place to sit in your own office in the middle of a practice full of people, completely alone with something you can't talk to your team about, can't fully explain to people outside of this world, and you don't even know if you can fix it. So a few months later, I reached out for consulting for the first time. Yes, 8 years into building this practice, I finally reached out for consulting. And eventually, I made the decision to transition from a 1099 to a W-2 practice. During that transition, 9 therapists left. The practice took a serious financial hit. It was serious. And I'm not going to pretend that it wasn't painful. It was extremely painful on multiple levels. But on the other side of it, the dust has settled. And on the other side of it, new people, a healthier culture, a practice that feels like mine again, a practice that is aligned with my biblical values and my work as a Christ follower. Looking back, I see that God was clearing the room. He was pruning, he was making space, he was clearing the floor for something better. But I could not see that from my office in 2022. I could only sit there and pray and hold on. That story is not unique. I hear versions of it quite often from the practice owners that I consult with. The financial call that your family thinks should be simple, the staffing decision that your friends think is obvious, the client whose insurance lapses, and you're holding the tension between your spiritual conviction that you do not abandon people, your ethical obligation to continuity of care, and the financial reality that unlimited pro bono will eventually threaten everything you've built. You carry that weight alone and you just keep going. That's the loneliness I'm talking about. And if you've felt it, you are not imagining it. It is real, and it's one of the least talked about things in this work that we do as Christian practice owners. Now, I want to talk about something that I think makes this particular flavor of loneliness different from what other business owners experience, because plenty of business owners feel isolated in their leadership. That's not unique to us. But I do think there's something about being a Christian practice owner specifically that adds a layer that is genuinely hard to find community around. It's the combination: clinical complexity plus business responsibility plus faith based values, all three pulling on every major decision that you make. And the tension between them is real and it is constant. Think about it. We are trying to run profitable, sustainable businesses, whether you're solo or group, because we have to, in order to keep serving our communities and for our own financial well being. We have to eat and pay the bills too, right? And yet, there is often this quiet, unspoken pressure in Christian spaces that talking about profits somehow feels unspiritual, like it's wrong, like wanting your practice to be financially healthy is in conflict with your calling. Like, if you were really doing this for God, the money stuff wouldn't really matter. That's just not true, y'all. Stewardship requires sustainability. You cannot keep the doors open on good intentions alone. That is a reality of life. You cannot pay yourself, your staff, serve your clients, or fulfill your calling if your practice is hemorrhaging money. Financial health is not the opposite of kingdom work. It's what helps make kingdom work possible. But try explaining that to a room full of people who have never run a business and see how far you get. Then, on the other side of things, try explaining your faith based values and your sense of calling to a secular business owner. The way you make decisions through prayer, the way your mission statement isn't just marketing copy, it actually governs how you lead, the way your core values form your framework for decision making and do lead almost every decision that you make in your practice, the way you sometimes make choices that aren't the most financially optimal because they're the right thing to do before Christ. A lot of people in the business world don't have the language to understand that. They don't get it. So you end up sitting in this very particular in between place. Too business minded for some Christian circles, too faith driven for other business circles. And if you're a group owner, your team, as much as you love them, again, cannot be the ones you process this with. The result is that a lot of Christian practice owners are figuring this out in isolation, quietly, alone, and for years. I even remember the early days of being a solo practitioner, and it was early days. And so, of course, my schedule looked like I'm heavy in the early morning, and then I have this big break, and then I'm heavy again in the after school hours and the early evening hours because those are typically the times that most people won't. And so I remember sitting there one day, it was like 1:30 or 2 o'clock, alone in my office as a solo practitioner. And at the time, I was renting space from a pediatric office here in town. So downstairs was very busy, doctors, nurses, staff, very busy, kids, all the things. And I'm sitting alone in my office upstairs thinking, gosh, I would love to talk to someone right now. Who can I call? Well, I can't call this person. They're working. I can't call my husband. He's working. Everyone was working, right? And so again, it was this, I miss companionship, and I had come from a group practice, and I miss the camaraderie and the rapport that was there in a group practice. But again, solo or group, you're going to experience this loneliness at some point. So I think I'm describing something that we've all felt at some season of our practice ownership journey, or if you haven't yet, you will. So I do want to talk to you about when things started to change for me, because they did change. Thank the Lord. And I want to be honest with you about the timeline because I think that matters. So I opened Over Counseling in 2015. I built it from a solo practice into a group practice. I grew it to 7 figures, and I did the vast majority of that largely without a room full of people who truly understood what I was doing or why. And it wasn't until 2023, as I said, 8 years in, that I finally reached out and got consulting. 8 years. And it was Whitney that I reached out to. So thank you, Whitney Owens. But I remember that first consulting call. I remember the feeling of being in a conversation where I didn't have to spend 10 minutes explaining the context, where I could say something about a staffing decision or a financial tension or a values conflict, and Whitney got it immediately because she was living it too. It was just understood instantly. And then I was placed in an accountability group with other practice owners at a similar stage of growth. And then I went to a conference and I sat in a room with other Christian business owners who were carrying the same weights and burdens I was, and who had the same questions that I had that I was asking, wrestling with the same tensions, carrying the same weight. And what I felt in those moments, I mean, it was relief. Yes. It was camaraderie and connection and rapport because I love hanging out with other therapists because we immediately start affirming each other and reframing and supporting. We're a great group of people, particularly Christian practice owners and Christian therapists. But underneath all of that was something quieter and a little bit harder, which was grief. Grief that had taken me 8 years to find this. And I have no doubt that there had been moments when God had placed something like consulting or masterminds in front of me before, but I wasn't paying attention or I was not heeding the call of the Holy Spirit. But I was feeling a grief for all the decisions that I had made alone that I didn't have to make alone. Grief for the weight that I carried unnecessarily. We are God's children, and He built us for connection, not isolation. And I had chosen isolation for a long time. And out of this grief came a resolve. I don't want this for other Christian practice owners. I don't want you to spend the night wondering what's going to happen in my practice the next day. I don't want you to spend 8 years figuring this out by yourself when you don't have to. A community of practice owners exists. The people who get it exist. The room where you don't have to explain the context before making the point exists. You just have to find your way into it. So if you've been listening to this episode, nodding along, I see you. I know what it feels like to hold decisions that almost nobody around you can fully understand. I know what it's like to lead from a place of conviction while carrying the weight of it mostly alone. I know the exhaustion of having to be the strong one, the clear-headed one, the one with the answers, when what you really need is someone to sit with you in the complexity for a minute. And I want to say something clearly. That loneliness is not a sign that you're doing anything wrong. It's not a sign that you're too much or that your problems are too complicated or that you should have figured this out by now. It doesn't mean that you're too needy. It's simply the reality of a role that few people fully understand. And the solution is not to need less. The solution is to find your people because they're out there. Christian practice owners who are asking the same questions you are, who are holding the same tensions, who understand what it means to try to build something profitable, something sustainable, and something that God uses for His work in this world. Something so sacred. And someone who also knows that these things are not in conflict. That's important. Someone who can sit with you in a hard staffing decision without needing 10 minutes of context first. You are built for this work, but you were never meant to build it alone. Which brings me to something I want to share with you, something I've been building specifically because of everything I just told you. So in July, I'm launching a mastermind group called Built to Last, growing from a solo practice to a group. And it's designed exactly for the person who has been listening to this podcast and thinking, yeah, that's me. I know what you're talking about, Amy. Built to Last is for the Christian practice owners who are either growing from a solo to their first hire, or who have maybe already one therapist hired, but they're ready to grow bigger, but who are also just tired of trying to figure this out alone. So this group starts on July 9th and it runs for 6 months. So we'll finish a couple of weeks before Christmas. We meet live over Zoom every other week. And we're going deep on the things that matter when you're looking at business and sustainability and growth. Systems, financials, marketing, admin, and clinical compensation strategies, money mindset, interviewing, hiring, onboarding, and maybe most importantly, how to shift your mindset from clinician to CEO. Because that mind shift, that is one of the hardest and most necessary things you will do as a growing practice owner. It is definitely a process, but it's much easier when you're not doing it alone. This group is going to be a room full of people who get it, who share your faith, who understand the clinical complexity and the business reality and the calling that underlines it all. People who love Christ and who very much want to do his work in this world, but who want to do it in community and who want to really just learn from others. Like I always say, learn from me. I will teach you lots of ways not to do it wrong. Learn from my mistakes. But it's gonna be people that you don't have to explain yourself to, people who just get it. If that sounds like something you're looking for, I would love for you to come and check it out. And best of all, if you register by June 18th, you get the early bird pricing, which is $50 off per month. And if you're a Wise Practice community member, you can get an extra $100 off per month for the group. So if you're a community member and you sign up by the early bird date, that is $150 off per month. That is awesome, guys. It is awesome. And you have access to me between our group meetings. So you don't just get to talk to me on the live calls. We also have a way that we communicate between the calls when you have something that maybe you're working on and need just a little bit more support and input with. But you can find all the details about the group and get registered at wisepracticeconsulting.com/masterminds. And we'll put that link in the show notes as well. If you're not quite sure yet about doing the mastermind or doing a group like this or just consulting in general, that's okay. Keep listening, keep showing up, take it before God, ask for his wisdom and his guidance. He will make the right step clear. Thanks so much for being here today. My inaugural episode on the video. I hope I did okay. But I want you to remember the work that you're doing matters more than you probably give yourself credit for, particularly on those hard days, and you are not alone. I'll talk to you next time.